Welcome to the HuskGuys podcast. Oh yeah!
We're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the HuskGuys podcast. It is August 5th. It's a Monday night, Monday following an outstanding spring practice from a Saturday. We got a very special guest tonight, a very sleep-deprived, brand new dad. Joining us tonight, Connor Happer is on the show. Connor, pumped to have you on. We'll give you a proper intro here in a second. Andrew, my brother, is on here as well. And we are very excited to kick this thing off. But first, let's kick this thing off with a little bit of a word from our sponsors, which, as you guys know, is just us. It is Pipeline Jerky. Connor, I don't know if you knew we were behind that, but Pipeline Jerky is created for the Huskers offensive linemen. Every bag sold of the beef jerky and pork jerky goes directly to the Huskers offensive line. We're trying to rebuild the pipeline. They look pretty good. They look good on Saturday. We'll dive into a little bit of that. We got a new starting five, which will be very interesting to look at. But the guys are behind it. They've been great supporters of it. We've done some really cool events. We just hosted an event with Omaha Steaks out at a restaurant in York. Chances Are Steakhouse. Players did an awesome job out there. They shook hands, kissed some babies, signed some autographs. We've done a steak box. We've done all sorts of really cool stuff, all to raise awareness for the Huskers offensive line and get some big boys back up into the state. So we're pumped to continue to do that. So buy some Pipeline Jerky at pipeline-jerky.com. And also HuskGuysStore.com. Make sure you guys check this out. Andrew and I are rocking some of the new gear. I think we might have lost Connor, but we'll keep rolling through it. We got some off-season national champs gear. We got the Kool-Aid gear. We've got all sorts of cool stuff. This is the year gear. We've got all sorts of new cool stuff. This one is the off-season national champ shirt. So we got a ton of good stuff. I think we lost Connor, but we'll keep rolling through this. No, we're not going to ruin the surprise until he gets back. Until he gets back. So do a little intro. Here's what we're going to kick things off with. We have a bunch of content we want to run through. We're definitely going to talk about Mahomes and how the unbelievable virality of the photo that went viral last week. We got a ton of recaps to talk about from Saturday on the spring game itself. Not spring game. What do we get? What do we even call this thing?
The
fall preview.
1890 Lifeline support.
Lifeline support. Hooking up everybody with a lifeline support of a little bit of juice, but it was just enough to get the Kool-Aid flowing. I'm into it.
Absolutely.
I'm into the concept. I think it's cool that they open up practice. I think everybody was kind of, I think what they say, like 4,000 people went.
Yeah, of course, 4,000 people went.
Yeah, I think 4,000 is insane. I think people were probably like maybe 60,000 will go, but 4,000 to go to a Saturday afternoon practice is still kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, I think my initial impression was the exact same. Like Husker fans are insane. They'll take in a practice, and honestly, there wasn't that much of a notice. Like it was maybe a couple weeks beforehand, and people were just like, "Yep, that's on the calendar. We're doing that. That is a family outing. We are going to go take in practice, watch some drills, see how the boys are looking." So on that end, 3,500 people, pretty good number. On the other hand, I think Husker Nation is definitely going to turn out for the next one that happens like next year. Like this is something that if it becomes a yearly event, which Rule kind of came back and said, like, I want to do this, maybe one in the spring as well, like in addition to the spring game, and then, next summer as well and stuff. That could definitely become a momentum building thing. Like you start looking forward to summer camp because there's a, summer open practice and stuff coming up. So
I guess it's kind of like that Friday night. Yeah, it's like the Friday Night Lights thing that happened. Was that? I mean, I don't even know how long ago that was, but I think any inside glimpse that anybody looks at least, it's some of this high level stuff that I was seeing is people appreciated seeing like a full practice. They appreciated seeing how organized Rule was. They appreciated seeing like the hustle and like the depth and the different ways that they approach practice. I think that stuff's so new that like, you go to a spring game, you kind of know what you're going to see. You're going to see, football. So I think to see like a very choreographed college football practice and from everything I've heard and read and seen, because I was not physically there, it was a good practice. Like they really ran through the drills.
Like this is how it really goes. This is how it typically goes. I mean, to the point where people are getting injured, which really stinks.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sounded not good for Roger Gradney. It sounds like that one's That one.
Did they say what
he's
he
like
did?
a four-star athlete, freshman. But
He's
I
playing
haven't
around. What do
heard,
you do?
haven't heard the official word. It sounded like it was
Okay.
some sort of non-contact twist and turn and knee type injury. But
Are we back?
there we go. Hey, welcome to the internet.
I'm
the internet.
Connor. I was telling these guys before the show started, I very rarely have internet problems. 8 o'clock, bang, it hits. And then, of course, we go live. Here's pipeline jerky, and bang, it hits again. So we reset the router. We'll see what happens now. No guarantees. If I fall off, then, we'll replug it again. But thanks for having me, guys. Hello.
Hey, you're completely forgiven. You missed our big intro, and we didn't want to ruin it, but this is the screen you went on. You get a complete pass for your internet. You get a pass for everything. I cannot believe that you're on this podcast right now. We're greatly appreciative of you. Congratulations. I want to say it all live on the air. Yep. You put this on the internet, so I know it's like out there, but congratulations to you. I mean, tell us about your weekend.
Thank you, man.
How was your weekend?
So what was it? Thursday night, big storm rolls across, and we're waiting because my wife Jackie, who you guys know, was going to be induced into labor that evening. We were scheduled to go in from like 7 to in between 7 and 9. They gave us a time frame, like we were going to the plumber was coming to us or something like that. Yeah. They were like, "Hey, we'll call you," and we're like, "All right." Cable. Here comes this storm, and and we're like, "All right, we gotta batten down the hatches here first and figure that out." Got through it. 9 o'clock rolls around, and we're like, we should call them. Maybe they forgot about us or something. Called them. They were like, "Yeah, no, we didn't forget about you. We're just kind of backed up, lost power at the hospital for a little bit. So keep your
curveball.
Yeah, keep your phone on and maybe try and get some sleep. We'll call you." And sure enough, 3 o'clock in the morning, we passed out on the couch, and here's the call. And we went in, got there at 4, and started the process, and had baby Sophie on Thursday, late Thursday evening. So it was a eventful start, but a largely uneventful, stay at the hospital.
They started you off with like the worst night of sleep of your life, like before it even began.
Preparing, yeah, exactly. We were preparing us for this journey that we're about to go on. I always say that I'm a night owl. Like I stay up till past probably midnight anyway, so I'm pretty ready. And as I was telling you guys before the show, it's mostly mom who is having to deal with all of this stuff. I'm just there to say thumbs up, nice job, and let's move on to the next thing.
Mom's doing well.
Yeah, she's doing great. We're super pumped, and we're on day 3 at home now, so we're getting used to the new life here.
Outstanding. Yeah, I mean, amazing. We're talking a little bit about this, but this is fun for us, and it's one of the reasons I love this podcast. Is we've just made this small world connection. I've personally been following Connor, and so everybody should check out the Connor Happer Show on Twitter, across all the different networks that you're on, but Connor Happer Show specifically on Twitter, as well as following Connor Happer. I've been following him for as long as he's been doing this, as long as he's been a radio host. And at some point I was telling Connor that he posted a picture of his wife, and I zoomed in and looked at it, and was like, that looks crazily like my backdoor neighbor growing up, Jackie Johnson. And it's sure enough, there it was. So this small world of, nameless, faceless, like Husker entities coming together, like the HuskGuys, and was like, wait, I that's crazy. I know this guy. So this is super fun for us that we're huge fans of the Johnson family. We're huge fans of John and Jackie, and Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, who I never was able to call them by their real name, which called Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. But it's great to have you on the show, Connor. We're really appreciative, especially having a baby. I saw you. I mean, I literally sent you an email about doing this, and then you post your picture. I was like, there's no chance this sleep-deprived mess is going to be on the show. And here he is.
I'm trying to put myself through some challenges this week. And so you guys are part of this grand experiment. And so I appreciate you guys having me on. This will be fun. And like you said, small world, this is crazy. So thanks for having me.
I'll even add one more. You don't even do your own show today. I listened to your show today. You didn't even do that, but you're doing our show. So we appreciate you.
This is once again, I'm just trying to slowly wean myself back. I'll do a couple more things here and there. Do the podcast where I could do it in my home studio. But not the show yet.
Outstanding. Awesome. All right. Should we dive into these? Should we some Husker football?
Let's do it.
We
Okay.
should.
Good idea.
So
This is the biggest news you missed was that we have a
This
player
is-
that looks
I
like
mean-
someone else.
So for those not watching the live stream, I've got some screenshots up here, and if you completely missed it, I'll walk you through what happened last week. But so Dylan Raiola reported to camp, and there was a picture posted by the Huskers of him wheeling in his suitcase. And I will admit, the Huskers posted on the official feed. They rolled it in, and I kind of did a double take. Honestly, I was like, oh, that's weird. It does look like Mahomes a little bit. But like it's a Huskers tweet. It's like whatever, nothing's gonna happen. And all of a sudden, I'm pretty sure the first one to tweet it was the NFL, like the NFL page, and maybe somebody right before them. But the NFL tweeted something directly on top of it. They kind of did one of those like squinty eye faces that are like, this looks like Patrick Mahomes. And then very shortly after, Adam Schefter tweeted, 5-star QB Dylan Raiola pulled up to Nebraska camp looking like Patrick Mahomes. And from then on, the internet went absolutely nuts. like just the absolute, like, I sort of love things as they start and then like grow and grow and grow. And Adam Schefter like lit fire to this thing. Before long, basically every major news source was talking about how Dylan Raiola not only looks like Patrick Mahomes in this picture, dresses like him, but then also, as I woke up the next morning and watched SportsCenter on SportsCenter, it was one of the lead stories on SportsCenter. They had an entire segment with Linda Cohn. Tyreek Hill was on it
so badly.
Patrick
we
Mahomes was saying,
we needed to start so bad.
Tyreek Hill said, boy, ain't no way. On the picture itself, Patrick Mahomes said, that's my little cuzzo. Absolutely nuts. But the fact that Linda Cohn is standing there with a straight face, like, wow, Nebraska has a quarterback that looks like Patrick Mahomes. But then they showed a full set of his spring game highlights, showing him like, throwing off his back foot, throwing off, doing the whole thing. I mean, it was a wild 48 hours. Connor, did you pay attention to any of this?
Oh yeah. I saw all this happen. So they were moving into the dorms on whatever day that was, I guess Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever last week. And then it was sort of a delayed fuse, right? It was the Husker community was kind of like, there's something here. Here comes our quarterback walking into the dorms. And then the NFL community got a hold of it. And then it kind of just blew up from there. Here's the thing that's funny about this. Like, we knew about this. We know this piece of Dylan Raiola, right? Like he has modeled his game off of Patrick Mahomes. He's he's friends with him, right? Or at least he's, acquaintances. They work out together, right? They have the same quarterback coach.
Right.
But it's not so like it's if you read NFL Twitter, you saw this happening, you'd be like, oh, this is kind of funny. This guy's walking into practice and he thinks he's Patrick Mahomes. He's wearing like a Patrick Mahomes Halloween costume. This is really funny. But it's not. That's just who he is. That's what he looks like. And then that's how he plays football. And that's how he does. So I really love it. And it was a very funny 24 to 48 hours on Twitter. And that was great moving into the dorms. And now we get to actually see him play football. So hopefully this kind of sticks around. It'll be like, wait a minute, he just threw a sidearm pass through 7 hands or something like that en route to a touchdown, or threw a left-handed pass on a ditch off 3rd and 3 or something like that. That'll be the next step of this. But yes, it was very funny.
Do you think Mahomes is flattered or kind of like, all right, what's going on here?
I think like he can't help the fact that he looks like him. He literally
it's just like, this is my face. I don't know what you want me to do about my face.
Yeah, right. And so and if he's good at all at quarterback, then people will make comparisons to Patrick Mahomes because he's the best quarterback. Like, that's just, so there's some of it that you just can't even control, but then you add in the fact that they actually do kind of work together and they share some acquaintances, and Mahomes will jump in and they'll say, hey, that's my guy, I know him. It's funny too how like NFL community views this, like, man, that's this little guy, and then they find out more about him. He's like, wow, he's coming up, he actually might be kind of good. And you look at it from the Nebraska standpoint, it's like, yeah, this guy's a deity, he's
if only you guys knew.
It's pretty funny to look at that. It kind of takes the magnifying glass off it a little bit, which is nice from time to time.
Very funny. There were some This is exclusively a positive vibes only podcast. We only talk about positive things. There were some negative comments that were made.
Oh, really?
That I don't want to bring to light, but some of them from Colorado fans, which I have bookmarked, they called him inappropriate things. They called him Patrick Mahomes, which I didn't appreciate. I will say it aloud because it's kind of funny, but I was also like, I'm going to bookmark this, and I can't wait to beat you. So we better freaking beat Colorado so that I can unbookmark these tweets and come after him.
But here's the thing. Patrick Mahomes is kind of fat too. Like,
correct. Which I also, if you went super deep on it and you went into the comments, they were like, "Here's Patrick Mahomes with his shirt off." It's like, oh, yes,
yeah, those pictures are out there.
Yeah,
we're good.
We'll be fine.
I think we're good.
It's because they took it in landscape mode. That's why.
Yeah.
You can't take it in landscape and then turn it vertical. That's it's going to add 20 pounds.
Do we know who the poor girl is behind him that had to go viral across the entire internet?
Yeah, that's his sister.
It is. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, she's now on the recruiting staff at Nebraska, but yeah. So she got, at least they got a good picture of her, right? She's smiling and kind of walking. They got a good picture of her. If that would have been a bad picture of her, I would have been, she would have been really angry probably.
Incredible. There's tons. I mean, there were a lot of NFL guys that did chime in or I'm excited to see this kid play. I've seen his tapes. All right, this is it was a majority positive. Some of those negatives are, I don't know, they're kind of funny. Some are rude, but the fact that they were literally on SportsCenter showing him in our spring game in August. Yes, I would say everybody is completely bored out of their minds and we need Husker football to start. We need football in general to start. But at the same time, it's in the middle of the Olympics.
Yeah,
they're showing Dylan Raiola's spring game highlights. I was are we back?
It kind of underscores he knows, he has a connection with everybody, whether it's from his dad being in the NFL as long as he has, or Matt Stafford being his godfather or whatever it is, and working out with Mahomes. He's kind of got this thing where everybody is at least aware of him. And then, if he comes up and his freshman year at Nebraska is a success, there'll be people from the NFL stars will look at him and be like, yeah, I told you about this guy. Because I've seen him play since he was 12 years old, and I knew that he could sling it. So he's kind of got this thing. He's got a really wide, community of people that he can talk to and bounce things off of, obviously because of his dad and his roots there. But I mean, that's a really great start. Not only is he a 5-star quarterback, but he's got all these, great connections and stuff like that too. And when you're that kind of guy, you grow up in the spotlight like he has, I don't know, that absolutely affects, how you play quarterback and, how you deal with the limelight once you get there. We've seen dudes come in and, they've had these expectations that have been put on them and it just, didn't work. I don't know. I'm not worried about him. I'm not worried about Dylan for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's a good segue. Let's talk Dylan on from this weekend. So
Nice.
I laughed at this. I put this up real quick for those not listening. Matt Rule in his press conference said you guys are going to have stuff to talk about on all of your podcasts for days after practice, which is.
Thank you.
I laugh at him and how in tune he is with all this stuff. Where he's I'm all you guys care about is your podcast and your content, and here you go. I'm just going to throw you some red meat.
He probably gave Dylan those sunglasses or something. He's like, here, just try these. Just try these on.
Here's some red meat.
That's real though. He I don't know if he's listening to all the stuff and reading all the stuff himself. I'm sure he gets some clippings or whatever. Here's what people are talking about. I don't know if it's a daily thing. I don't know how he gets it, but he does get it. He reads it, he listens to it in some way. And so he knows, and if you listen to him do his press conferences, there will be times where he's talking to, specific, whether it's sections of the fan base or specific media members who are like, hey, I know that he won't say I know this narrative is out there, but that's the subtext to it. Hey, I know this narrative is out here. So let me just squash that. And let me turn it this way. And that's why he's so good at this. He's an incredible, it's part of the reason he's so good at this. He's an incredible CEO. He kind of has a really good understanding of what's going on and what's being said around him and about his program.
Tell me, can you unpack that a little bit more as someone who's in the media? What is your relationship like with the coaches in general? how does that work when the cameras are off, or as you're setting things up, or as you're at Big Ten Media Days or at practice or after practice? How is the overall relationship? Kind of an open-ended question.
It depends on how the coach wants to do it. It depends on how the coach wants to play it. There are some coaches who have been like hot and cold. Like, Bo was, depending on which day of the week it was, like, and depending on who you were, like, pretty friendly after the cameras were off. It's like he wanted a world where there was like 4 people who covered the team and they got all the information and like kept it under lock and key. And, and I think that's like, there's advantages to that, right? He wanted to coach at a smaller program. Didn't get it, obviously. And, Riley, I don't think had a really good understanding of what the media at Nebraska was before he got here, but I don't think did a bad job with it. He was really open, maybe in some cases too open. He would volunteer injury reports each Thursday before the games, which he did not have to do, but he was really, everything anyone ever says about him is very true. Like, he's an incredibly nice guy, and you could just talk to him and pull him aside and ask him about anything. Frost, in like moments of in between when it wasn't going bad or something, he's kind of like Bo in that way. Just if you caught him in the right moment, he would show signs of being a normal person, just like a guy to hang out with. I remember, so I guess this would have been his first media days for us in 18. We were still in the hotel basement in Chicago at the time. And him and Davison came back from the Cubs game. And they went to the Cubs game that day because Frost's a huge Cubs fan. And they walked back in, and, basically all the, Nebraska media is sitting there in the hotel bar. And he had the look of, he was going to sit down and, enjoy himself for a little while. But then he kind of saw that everybody was watching him and, shook hands with a couple people. Is like, see you later. We'll move this party upstairs. So just not how he wanted to live in anonymity too. Rule is like, he's a professional. And I don't want to say this in a negative way, like he's manipulating or anything like that, but he definitely understands what's being said and how it works. And on top of that, he's genuinely a nice guy. Like, he'll, you can ask him about stuff. He lives, like, he has a life. It doesn't seem like it sometimes. He has a life. And so it's the same thing with all the other assistant coaches too. Just if you catch him at the right time on the right day and you want to ask him about something. And I think you'd probably find that they are actually way more, just in general, coaches are way more willing to talk just as a person than you would think, like, and a lot of that stuff happens. It just doesn't, get published anywhere or anything like that, which is a good thing. That's how you build the relationships in the media. So it's all about how you handle it as the coach. And some coaches have handled it very, very poorly.
Yeah. I feel like I think it's refreshing and seems like a breath of fresh air a little bit for Rule, at least from our standpoint. Like, I keep going back to Frost, and Frost has been such a hard breakup because, he's beloved and we loved him, and he was like a, favorite player growing up and chosen one, that I felt bad that he felt that he needed to, I feel like he felt like he needed to be distant. Like, his family is off limits, his kids are off limits, his wife's off limits. Like, his private life is completely separate. It seemed like he wanted to be like completely out, and he felt so much pressure because anything off might have like skewed the image. Where it feels like Rule's embraced Lincoln more. He's embraced his family. He talks about his wife. He talks about like the relationship. He talks about how they want to have dinner with the players. That to me feels like a little, maybe it's just maturity and he's done this more. But that feels, it comes across genuine, and whether, it comes across and he's truly embracing the role and the opportunity and the spotlight.
Frost really liked the idea that he could, like, he was the coach at Central Florida, so he could go to, Publix and grab a sandwich and nobody would notice him. Nobody would say hi to him. Maybe one guy
slide
would be
down,
like, hey,
slide down railings, maybe.
Florida, right? Yeah, slide down the railing, whatever. He really liked that. Yeah. And for most of his life, in coaching, he was able to do that, even when he was the offensive coordinator at Oregon, or coaching wide receivers or whatever. When he came here, he set that thing. He set that line down right away. The day he got here, he was like, "We're not talking about this." Like, that's kind of weird, but okay. And because you're not going to be able to really avoid it. And then, sure enough, his family becomes a central talking point on message boards and whatever for the next 3 years that he's at Nebraska. And so with Rule, he really appreciates being a CEO, being all of the things that a football program needs him to be. Like, he obviously loves football and he loves coaching football, like the stuff that Frost likes, X's and O's and whatever. But I think Rule conducts himself. I've noticed this over the last few weeks here. He conducts himself in the way he talks about his program. You would be thinking if this was an NFL structure that he was the general manager, that's the way he talks about the team, because he has all these other coaches who are in charge of their things. And now with the gigantic staff, those coaches get to have their own kind of staff a little bit underneath them. And so it's a gigantic operation but ultimately everything goes through him and he understands that, and he's not afraid to work 24/7, which is good.
It's funny you say that, because I was just thinking almost the same the other day. Like, one of Frost's downfalls, not to talk about him twice within a minute because we need to move past him, but he one of his downfalls was that he almost just seemed like he wanted to really just kind of focus on offense and basically just want to kind of be an offensive coordinator.
And he'd be really good at that, by the way. He would have been a totally he would have been a good offensive coordinator at Nebraska.
Of course. And no doubts about that. But he didn't want to do that extra, and he didn't want to be that CEO type. And Rule, props to him. He wants to, just like any big business or politician for that matter, he wants to control the narrative a little bit. He kind of, I think, has his ear to the ground. He has people telling him, but in a way that is he's open to criticism, but he wants the narrative around us to be, we are a hardworking, we represent a blue collar I think he's got the Nebraska message, and he's now taking it and preaching Nebraska, even though he's not from here. It's probably one of the more impressive things is that you almost feel like he's a Nebraskan.
He has done that at wherever he's been. He was never in Texas before he went to Baylor, and all of a sudden, he's speaking at the convention every year still, to this day at the high school coaches convention. So he has a way of indoctrinating himself to the people around him. And, and like I said, he's pretty genuinely a good guy. And then as far as how to handle the staff, you got to trust people. You have to be willing to kind of say, okay, this is yours. And, he is, I think, a micromanager, just talking to people who are on his staff. And I think it's hard to work for him sometimes because they expect, he expects so much out of people. But, once you have his trust, then you can run the show. It's yours. It's whatever you want it to be. And so I think that was probably another shortcoming of Frost as well. He kind of shouldered a lot of that and was, then had shortcomings from there.
Are you made a point that you said he's not afraid to work 24/7. He's not afraid to grind. And I think we've seen that. He's recruiting all over the state, all over the country. Are you surprised by that because of the amount of money that he made in the NFL and how much money he's made in general? I think that was one of my questions on him coming in is he that hungry Matt Rule from 4 years ago? It appears as he is, but curious your perspective. Are you surprised he's still grinding the way he is? When
he was hired, I loved and keep in mind what we always do when Nebraska fires a coach and then, you got to hire the next one. You're always overcorrecting a little bit. Nebraska's done it 7 times now. They just overcorrect. Oh, we need this because the last guy was this. But one of my things that I thought at the time was I love the idea that he got fired. I love the idea that it went so horribly for him in Carolina. And some of that was in his control and some of it wasn't. And some of it is just the idea that he is probably just better suited in the college game. There's that piece of it too. But I think he had his time to sit on his couch and get a little retrospective about what he needs to do and where he belongs and the things that he really wants. And I think he came to Nebraska, came to Trev Alberts with like a really good picture of that. And luckily those two visions, like really, they were pretty much in lockstep, and Trev had a very, very clear idea what he wanted, and Rule had a very clear idea of what he wanted, and they were willing to kind of work together on that. So I think that's as much as people want to get after Trev, like that, he hired that guy. And I don't know that like, I don't know if Troy Dannon does or goes after him, or has the kind of leeway to go get it. Like, I don't know what happens if somebody else is in charge. So, I mean, there was definitely that piece of it, assuming it all works out how we think it's going to work out.
To be clear, no, we love Trev because he hired Rule. We don't like Trev because he's a traitor. It's a subtle nuance.
It has nothing to do with him except for his entire character. I mean, like,
as long as he doesn't come back to Lincoln ever again, I'm fine with him. He did a great job.
Yeah. Well, I imagine he'll make that trip back at some point for maybe a college football playoff game in December or something like that.
I mean, he already came back for the College World Series.
I'll make him sit up at the top of South Stadium that's not being renovated.
Yeah.
See that?
That's unfortunately part of the lasting legacy as well. See that 100-year-old South Stadium? Nothing's going to happen to that for a while.
So speaking of like,
keep going.
Trev and like, I don't know, all the coach speak and how Rule conducts himself and everything. One question, I guess, for you, just being kind of in Husker media, like if I were in your shoes, I mean, every time we host a podcast and we get a little, just a little shot of Husker Kool-Aid, I add another win to our win total. I'm like, yep, this guy knows everything, and he said this, therefore. How do you like surround yourself with interviews every day about Husker football, diving into the media and stuff? And I guess do you bite in on a lot of, I don't know, maybe all these big positives and stuff that you're hearing, and then B, like you also have the coaches who, of course, they're doing all the coach speak. They're doing, it's another good practice. This guy's looking great. This guy's looking great. This guy's developing so well. Do you buy into it all, or how do you like stay grounded if you don't?
That's a great question. I will definitely I will definitely get more positive as we get closer to the season, and like I'll do, because we're all looking for stuff to talk about. Like I'll throw ideas out there of like, hey, here's some reasons why, and we'll make this a couple weeks long thing. I'll do a segment about, hey, if this happens, then what? If this happens, then what? If this doesn't happen, then what? And whatever. And at the end of those conversations, like, yeah, I could get pretty Kool-Aid-y, pretty tasty, pretty sweet. No doubt. Like, so I'll always be more positive at the end of the offseason than I probably was at the beginning. But I do ground myself. I try to ground myself in the schedule, like, and not the idea that the schedule is like easy or hard, but like I try to read and listen to as much coverage on other teams as I possibly can, because what you'll find is you'll go out and you'll listen to a Minnesota podcast, or you read something out of Wisconsin, and you'll be like, these dudes love where they're going right now.
Yeah, God, this team sounds good too.
Yeah. Those guys think that they're going to be really good this year.
These teams all sound good.
Right. And so you have to kind of figure out what's what, and, be critical when you can, but no doubt about it. I think we all like fall victim to it. As we, you look at the schedule right there and you're like,
let's do it.
Gosh, yeah. How do they not win it?
What do you see, Connor? What do you see?
I always do this, like, it's more of a math equation, right? They're gonna lose a game or two that they're not supposed to. I'm not sure they're at the point yet where they're gonna win a game they're not supposed to, which is, I don't know, that'll be an interesting one. And then you got a bunch of 50-50 games. Like, so I don't know, you could convince me of anything from probably 5 to 9. And then I don't like, because they're going to be in like, if you look at, I don't know what's going to happen with Colorado this year, but you just do the Big Ten teams. You're like Illinois, Rutgers for sure, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa. Those games are going to be 7-point games in the fourth quarter, like all of them.
Yep.
So, usually you don't win all of those. But maybe you catch lightning in a bottle and you do. So I don't know. It's going to be a fun ride, I think.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the consensus is everybody looks at these. And Colorado's such a tough one because they smoked us last year, but then they lost every game from there on out, and they're having fights in their locker room right now. And Shiloh Sanders is slapping everybody on their team. And
I did see that. That was pretty funny.
It's absolute just dumpster fire over there. So I would love to beat him so we could just be done with the Deion experiment. But that's a weird one, and I think we're going to that game, so we better win. But also, they smoked us last year, so who knows? But the other ones are, just because we had Brett Ciancia on, who's saying that Purdue is really supposed to struggle this year, Indiana's supposed to struggle. So then you're kind of looking at like, okay, so you get UTEP, you get Northern Iowa, Illinois, and Rutgers, like you said, are kind of like, okay, those will be likely Vegas odds within 7 points.
Definitely.
But I think everybody's going to this 7-0 number. It's probably not going to be, just because of, like you said, like what we've lost 3 of the last 4 to Illinois. Like who's to say we just automatically come out and beat them? But it does get interesting, and I think that back half is probably the most concerning. I think UCLA with a new coach, USC has Lincoln Riley turned around. You had a guy on that was just dogging USC last week. That I was like, man, are they not going to be good? That'd be great.
The USC guy. Oh, I wasn't there last week. The USC guy was killing USC. He was not happy.
Killing him. Yeah, he was on your show, but he was like dogging USC.
That's
I was
funny.
like, this guy is like, he wasn't dogging USC. He was dogging Lincoln Riley.
We talked to the gosh, I think it was the Northern Iowa guy, and everything's relative because they're the FCS. And, he's the voice of Northern Iowa, but he was having a difficult time. Like, all right, how are we going to make this work? It was the same thing with Purdue. Dean Hart, we had Dean Hart on right before I left, and he was like, I don't know. They got problems everywhere. I think if they get to 6, that'd be good. The Nebraska game's a big game, and whatever it might be. So that is not Nebraska's frame of reference this year. No matter if you're like objective or subjectively looking at the team, you're like, no, it's objectively not fun if they are just trying to scrap and claw to get to 6 anymore. I think we've definitely, landed there toward the end of this offseason.
Have you allowed yourself, just for a moment, to flirt with 10-2?
Of course. Like, yeah.
I mean, just have you let your mind, you've gone there. Okay.
You can make a case. Of course you can make a case. Like the case is,
it's like that's a gateway drug right there.
Yeah.
Well, 9-3 is a gateway drug to 10-2. It's like,
yeah. Cause if you're at 9-3, you might as well just go the whole deal.
Oh, if you're doing 9-3,
the whole line at that point or whatever.
What's one more?
Like, so the case is, all right, the defense is really good. It gets helped out by the fact that the offense isn't turning the ball over 100 times. It's all focused around this idea that the offense turned the ball over 31 times last year. And so theoretically, the defense gets better because they're playing more downhill because they're not put in such bad positions. They get more explosive. They create more turnovers. The offense is like at least fine. You could start there, at least fine. They'll be able to, pass it. They should be able to run it okay. But if you get to that 10 mark, if you get to the 9-10, then you're thinking Raiola's going to get cooking. Like something special is going to happen with him. And how is that not inside the realm of possibility? Like it just is. So like of course I've thought about it. I
good.
It's not likely, but it's in the realm of possibility for sure.
It's the most beautiful time of year. It's August 5th, and it is just the off season. It's why we've made these off season champ shirts. It's why we live and die by it. I even put out something today that finished just the absolute like greatest gut punch of all time, losing to Iowa last year, and like the most unthinkable loss in 4 straight losses in November. And this fan base is like absolutely in the dumps. And then today, the top 25 poll came out and we got top 25 votes. It is like nobody does the offseason better at hyping this program up and getting people to believe that we are back and we're going to go start 7-0 and we might finish 9-3. That like I feel like it just gets into writers' heads that they're like, oh, I totally forgot that they lost 4 straight games and like couldn't beat Iowa, who like barely even had any players left on their team. That it's a beautiful time of year. But I do think it is that what if is you're like the whole narrative last year is like, what if we had a quarterback with a pulse, that could just like manage an offense? And you're like, hey, Rule, can you figure this out? And he's like, oh, hey, how about the number 1 quarterback in the country?
Yeah.
Like,
I think that it's funny how it's framed, right? Like that we looked at it after the season and it was like, man, how they were 5-3. How the hell did they not get to 6 wins? I mean, that was a disaster. And then you kind of unpack it a little bit more, and Rule talks about it. And I think the way that he frames it up is, along the lines of, I think they were lucky to get to 5. The way it turned out, like if you look at the stats and you like put them in a computer, and that's like a 3-win team. They were minus 17 in the turnover, margin or whatever it was. I mean, it's horrible. So like, I think they felt like we did really good work last year to get to where we got to, fell short. And now we still have that hunger piece of like, this group hasn't accomplished anything yet, but they're all kind of coming back. I've said it on everything that I've done over the last couple of weeks. This defense has like this kind of last dance vibe to them. Like they all came back. And I think you guys tweeted out the thing from Gifford on the chasing 3 thing, right? Is that where I saw that? Yeah.
I was banging my chest. That
was awesome. Like that was fantastic. And that's legit. So I think they got a little bit of that like hunger, that edge to them too.
From Saturday we had the practice and we can kind of keep it going on this theme. I wasn't there, but I've read and watched every highlight that existed on. I thought that it was a pretty cool event, and that the bigger takeaways, and again, coming back to this Raiola theme that I found, was like almost every tweet that I read of a fan, or even like Sam McEwen said it, a lot of them were like, Dylan continues to be the real deal. Like this, Cornhusker Cole said he's worth the price of admission alone. And I think we haven't had a guy like that in a long time. It's like, it's worth going to the game to see one player. It's worth going to like see the way he commands the field. So I think that seemed to be a pretty common theme on the fan side. I think there was
that's interesting. That's a good way. That's an interesting way to frame it. Like Taylor Martinez, Amir Abdullah. The question,
Jay Palmer would be the most recent.
Yeah. Tough though, because he's a wide receiver, but for sure you had the sense later in the year that he was going to like go for 200 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see how much they put on his shoulders. How much are they really going to go out and sling it and really showcase him, especially early on in the season? Because I don't know, there's an argument to be made that that's their best, their best option is to kind of throw it around the yard a little bit. They have good receivers. They have a good quarterback who could get it to them. They don't have a great run game, I don't think.
Do you feel like you're hearing, like, it just in conversations with, all the Husker heads, BC, Brunts, Sipple, Callahan, all like in any of these conversations you're having, like, are you hearing any like different tone? Like, are you reading through things differently this year than other years? Or do you feel like it's kind of that same, like, all right, this is when journalists kind of do their thing? Or do you feel like it's, okay, this thing's got some legs, like something's different this year?
I don't feel that. I don't, it's pretty, it's always cautiously, I guess, optimistic. And I think that's I don't feel anything different. But man, like, what could really change that? You know what changes like the energy of the program in a hurry? Recruiting. Recruiting. If you get a 5-star recruit or 2 5-star recruits on top of your 5-star quarterback, and then you go out and win games, like, that changes the tenor real fast.
Yeah.
And we've had a couple on campus recently, and now we're flipping Mosey from Oregon. I mean, his dad came here. We just got to keep recruiting relatives of
it's worked
people.
Before.
Really, we just hired his father, and now we get a 4-star receiver as a package.
Yeah. Well, speaking of transfers, 2 of the guys mentioned here, Banks, Nayor, and both of these guys, and as well as a ton of different articles that I read, it seemed to be like the wide receiver room was one of the more talked about things from Saturday. What do you think about the depth, Connor, of the wide receiver room, especially compared to last year? Do you think that's been? I think it's improved. Do you think it's fixed? Where do you think it's at?
Oh yeah, I mean, tough to say like, hey, this is going to be really good, but it's definitely going to be better than it was last year. I mean, like they're running Bullock at Alex Bullock, and no offense to him, like they're running him with the threes at practice now. He was like he was
finest baby.
Yeah, he was their most probably trustworthy guy at the beginning of last year. Like we were talking about Alex Bullock. We're not talking about him anymore, and it's Banks and Nair, and then the young guys can kind of come along at a reasonable pace. Like here comes Lloyd and Coleman just building off of what they did last year, and Barney can come in and do some things, and they can mess with Carter Nelson however they want to mess with Carter Nelson, and you got Fedoni in the pass game too. Like so, yeah, they feel a lot better about that spot, and I certainly, just looking at it, I prefer, like if we're doing wide receivers versus running backs, I prefer the receivers. I just think there's top to bottom better stuff going on there.
Yeah, so that brings us into one other thing we had going on here on our just talking points. I was reading through Phil Steele's magazine. He's a big preseason guy, normally pretty accurate. His wide receiver depth chart does shake out kind of interesting. His predicted starters, so he's got Banks at wide receiver 1, and then Lloyd backing him up. I personally think Lloyd's going to be like almost all Big Ten caliber if he has the potential that we are thinking of and that he flashed in the spring game. Wide receiver 2, he had Nair and then Coleman backing him up. I mean, that's a pretty good lineup right there as a 1-2 punch, including your second string. And then in the slot, he had Bonner starting. Then he had Demetrius Bell, but he's hurt. And then IGC, who's coming back kind of off of injury. Are you buying this? I know, right? He's still on the team.
Yeah.
And he was good. He's like actually pretty dynamic. I mean, are you buying like that as the setup, or where are you at there?
Yeah, it's not like it's not like Banks is going to get 90% of the snaps and Lloyd will get 10. They'll be able to mix with different personnel groupings, but I do think that is pretty accurate. You got to remember, like Phil Steele. This is why Phil's great, because he literally picked up the phone and calls the coaches, and the coaches give him the stuff for his magazine. So it's the same stuff where you hear like broadcasters during the game. So if he mentioned Bonner playing, and then we saw it in an open scrimmage on Saturday, I think you got to take that seriously for sure.
It's pretty amazing because Bonner's gone from like receiver / tight end to
tight
end.
I think you want to have like a bunch of different
now
bodies.
He's a slot receiver.
They want to have like 100 different bodies doing 100 different things for that spot. I think that's kind of the idea. So it's intriguing. It really is. But I think they got plenty enough in that room to be able to pass the ball pretty well.
What do you think about Carter Nelson as my follow-up?
I wasn't a huge buy. Like, how could you be on a guy that played 8-man, but obviously you watch him move around and his athleticism is crazy. And then you hear Rule talk about him at media days. It's like, yeah, I'll talk about Carter Nelson all day. Like basically the idea is we had to get that guy on the field. And so, I love that. And I think they actually have an environment where it's not like, we have to force this guy into playing time. He's not quite ready yet, but we have to force him in there. Like they'll give him a little appetizer and a small diet and let him go, and do well with the stuff that he does right off the bat, and then kind of go from there. So I obviously the ceiling is incredible from an athletic perspective. I don't think he's going to, have 500 yards receiving this year, but whatever he gives you is a cherry on top, because I don't think I was really planning on getting much from him this year.
I think it's so insane to hear both of you guys talk about this, I'm just thinking back to like last year, our offensive strategy was just like, I think we just got to run Harburg up the middle again. And maybe he can run
We
somebody
were on
over.
our fourth string running back.
It's just like, maybe, maybe Bullock will get open. Probably won't. But I mean, it's just, you just listed 7 wide receivers, a couple tight ends in my play. Like, we haven't even talked about Fedoni. Like, it seems like, at least on paper again, and it's at least going to be a more exciting product on the field. The defense was exciting last year. The offense was excruciating.
Yeah.
It was like, you almost had to like leave the room.
I think the excitement low it's not necessarily about the people, like the personnel, although obviously that's good. And there's lots of reasons why Banks is better than whatever they had last year. And Raiola is better than whatever they had last year. Like that's all true, but it's the apparatus and the way that they've been able to kind of like, you can see this real development track when you take, a guy when he got here and then fast forward to where he's at right now. I mean, we don't even talk about Bryce Benhart anymore. Everybody wanted that guy on the moon, at the beginning of last year. And we're talking about him as like a potential all conference guy this year. And we're serious. So, I mean, I think they can really do that, create depth, develop, and then when you add the dudes on top of that, yeah, that's when you really start going.
I want to get your perspective on these guys, because this is another component that was a little bit of the chatter was Prohaska not on the first team offensive line. Made Corcoran, who now a lot of folks are thinking he's also going to be an NFL guy, and Benhart being an all-conference potential NFL guy. What do you think of how this at least first team offensive line was looking? Feels like we've got more depth. We love these guys because Pipeline Jerky, they're great supporters. Pipeline-jerky.com. But tell us about what do you think of the O-line? It seems like they're much improved. We got a ton of guys with a ton of experience. What's your perspective on this unit, and then overall like the depth side too?
It was definitely interesting to see Corcoran, come out with that first group. So I think you have to kind of figure out, we'll dive into this over the next couple of weeks of camp. Like, all right, is the position battle because, Teddy didn't take the job and run with it, or is because Turner did? Like there's different ways to frame that. It's the same thing with, well, I guess it's a little different with Mazuka. Mazuka, when he got here, and Rule got asked about it, I was like, I don't know. He's got some work to do. We'll see what happens. You're like, right. Whoa, is this guy going to make it? And then, he's stepping in. Obviously, Lutovsky's hurt right now, but, to go in and have him there is a really nice, either it's a backup kind of safety net idea, or like maybe he went out and grabbed the spot. We had heard over the last few weeks that he had really stepped things up over the summer, which is good. And then you can count on Scott and Benhart. It's like, I don't know, man. Dominic, Dylan, and Donovan Raiola. We're talking about Donovan now. He got beat up pretty good when he was the one guy retained, but yeah, I think he can coach, and I think he can develop too. And these guys have all gotten and apparently recruit as well. Yeah,
that was the most fascinating hire. I mean, the absolute, like, the only guy that got retained was the one that Husker fans wanted. Also shot to the moon with Benhart.
Yeah,
he was the one guy who was like, this line, just blow it up. And he was the only one that he kept.
It's a great example of how not all the position and the position coaches work in a vacuum. Like, wide receivers play bad. Well, sometimes it's not the wide receivers coach's fault, right. Like, and you have to kind of evaluate that. And I think it's best evaluated over a multiple year span. So you have to include the play, the development, and the recruiting. And sometimes even at the end of the 3 years or the 2 years or whatever, you just don't know, or maybe you feel like you have something good. You could tell who the real stars are, like who the real good guys are, and then maybe you could tell who some of the weak links are as well. But sometimes it's inconclusive, and they'll go through waves. So, wide receivers got 4 seniors this year. Like they're probably going to be pretty good. Does that mean Garrett McGuire is like the best coach on earth? I don't know. Like it's interesting the way we talk about those spots.
Love it. All right, folks, we got 1,200 folks still listening 9:00 on a Monday because Husker fans are the absolute best fans on earth. This is Connor Happer from the Connor Happer Show. Make sure you're following Connor Happer Show. Make sure you're listening to his show, 1620 The Zone. He's currently out on leave right now because he just had a baby 72 hours ago. So we're so grateful for him for being on the show. And I promised him I'd get him back to his wife very soon. But we want one more rapid fire round of things, if that's cool with you, Connor. I just want to get your take on 2 stories that happened over the weekend. Let me get these things pulled up. 2 of them, I'll throw them both of them at you, and you tell me if you think there's anything there or nothing. Michigan's making the news again as their issues from last year are stemming up. It sounds like it's a lot bigger than we thought. There's a lot of deleted text messages. They're getting accused of NCAA rules and notice of allegations. Some people are saying, obviously Michigan State fans and Ohio State fans are coming out and screaming death penalty. Some people are saying vacate wins. It's hard for me to read because there's like so many fans that are jumping in on this and saying, some bad things are going to happen. Some of it makes sense because Jim Harbaugh just pieced and had zero interest in coaching his team after winning national championship. But what do you think? Do you think anything's going to happen to Michigan for their sign stealing scandal with Connor Stallions?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if anything's going to happen because it's becoming a more complicated question by the day because of the lack of like authority that of a governing body, just I guess, of over college football right now. So that's sort of a complicated question, I guess. But like, if you would have told me like when when Harbaugh left and you're like, hey, is this over? I would have said probably not. Like because they're parting. Their line they were using that entire time was, yeah, that guy was a rogue. I don't know what he was doing.
Yeah,
and we all knew that
we had no idea. Just on the sidelines.
That was never true. That was a lie the entire time. So, yeah, not surprising that it came back up again. That's for sure.
Second story. Go ahead, Andrew. And then I'll go.
I just like it. I think it. I'm glad it's coming up again because it's like a top to bottom thing. And I think Michigan's just getting exposed more and more the more that comes out. And I don't doubt that there's other teams that might be guilty. Like, that's fine, I guess. If that's your defense, though, as Michigan, it's like, it's not a great defense for yourself. You're just pointing fingers at somebody else. And it's just so crazy. I mean, like, the whole sideline in some of these clips is signaling what the other team's going to do. The whole sideline, like the whole team knew about it. There's like the popcorn guys doing signals. I mean, there's just, it's top down, completely corrupt. They obviously cheated. They need to get in trouble for it. And I think it just goes beyond some like, oh, what did that maybe get them like one win? Like, no, you could see how this in close games could really kind of build up. And you won a national championship doing this.
Yeah. It's classic Michigan to be like, hey, we were all going 90 down the interstate in a 75. Like, why'd you pull me over? It's like, no, you were going 108, man. Like you were going faster than everybody else. You were taking some more liberties than everybody else. So that's not surprising the way that program, kind of, and the way that university just kind of carries itself. It's pretty, I don't know. They bother me. They've always bothered me.
Speaking of programs that carry themselves a certain way in our final segment of the show, but I do want to get your perspective on these guys. This came out on Colorado. Again, I don't know how true a lot of this stuff is, but I like to read about it, talk about it. Athlon Sports came out with this investigative report that basically said Colorado's culture is, quote, a real-life Grand Theft Auto video game full of fights, guns, and money, where players were bullied and slapped by Shiloh Sanders, prize recruits were bullied into proving their manhood by fighting former linemen, and players were getting in fights in the locker room over $10,000 gambling debts. Is it of course, the end comes out, it's all a smear campaign. Everybody's out to get us. What do you make of it? Do you think it's all smoke? Do you think it's absolute mayhem in that locker room? It's hard for me to even understand what's happening.
I think there's a lot of stuff going on. I think, first of all, people would probably be shocked and appalled about the things that go on in a college football locker room. There's There's that right off the bat. Like we got a bunch of 18 to 22-year-old dudes who are just dudes, and so it's, your culture is that's why coaches talk about culture all the time, because it's really hard. It's really hard to curate and control, and it can get out of control. But would it surprise me if like the Sanders, if Shiloh and Shador, like both had, this type of control over the program, or they were like the ringleaders and they were, they had to, like, there was hazing and stuff like what? No, that wouldn't surprise me. Like,
yeah, that sounds exactly right.
Yeah, they were. I mean, those guys have certainly been empowered to do kind of whatever they want since they've been at Colorado. So I don't know. Like, obviously, Deion says smear campaign. Maybe not. Maybe some of it's true. Maybe some of it's not. It doesn't. I think it's funny more than anything because, like, you can. It reads like satire, but you read the headline, you're like, oh, you know what? I guess I could kind of see that. That's kind of how it's going over there. So, no, it doesn't really bother me. And I'll say this too. I definitely don't want Deion Sanders to go anywhere. Like, I love the idea that he is there, and I wonder how long he will be there.
Their over under is at 4.5. Yeah,
I'm super curious to see how it goes this year for them.
Do you think they go over or under 4.5?
Gut says over. I think they'll probably be talent wise a little better than they were last year. They'll be in some close games. Maybe we'll see that kind of culture or whatever show up, but it should theoretically go better than it did last year.
There was a video today of Deion at practice, or maybe it was yesterday, and he's giving a talk to everybody, and he's going, all right, nobody touch the receivers, and you keep your hands off of the quarterback.
And Travis Hunter.
Quarterbacks are and Travis Hunter specifically, like, he's naming people out that, like, don't get touched because of their value in the NFL. I'm like, man, this place is getting run so differently than just other programs. I mean,
yeah. But at the same time, like, and while I agree, like, it's super odd to hear, just because you don't hear coaches talk like that ever, because coaches love to talk about how all means one and one means all and all that stuff. But, like, at the same time, there's not two better guys in the Big 12 than Shador and Travis Hunter. Like, there's not. So, like, they have to kind of protect him. Yeah.
He's got my brain in such a pretzel. I don't even know what to, like, think of the guy, because I think it's hard when it's clouded with, like, the emotional side of them beating us. They came in and wiped the floor with us, and I was like, Rule, what are you doing? You should be in the transfer portal getting 90 new players. Like, that's
what you should. Funny reaction. Yeah,
that's what you should be doing. Is he just flipped his roster from a 1-11 team, and he's about to go to the national championship game, and then he lost the rest of his games. So now I feel better about it. But I, like, right after the game, I was like, the transfer portal is where it's at, and every year we need 75 new players. That's what we need.
That would be so hard. That would be.
That's what he's doing, though. That's what he's doing.
Half of them,
and it's really hard. It's
half
really
of them have left.
And they got one thing. I mean, they're not going to have the depth, right? Like, they'll have players. And if you match up their best 5 against Nebraska's best 5, like, maybe the best 3 or 4 are Colorado players. But, like, what about out of the top 50? Because, sometimes you need 30, 40, 50 guys to win a football game. So, yeah, the depth is not going to be there.
Yeah. Amazing. Connor, thank you so much for joining with your brand new baby. You got to get home and get some, or actually just you are home. Go get some snuggles. Thank you so much. Congratulations on being a new dad, folks. This is Connor Happer, the Connor Happer Show. Make sure you follow him on Twitter and everywhere you can follow him at 1620. Listen to his show. It's a great show. I really enjoy it. Connor, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to talk to you guys. Thanks for having me. Anytime. And thanks to I just now pulled up the comment section, by the way. I see some familiar faces over there. So thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Appreciate it.